So about a week ago, my Discord sent me this Reddit thread here. This user, when switching from auto to hotkey, gained a considerable amount of FPS when they were benchmarking offline, as seen here. Once they get out of this screen, they went from 40s to 65. I saw this and I was like, oh, surely it's not. Oh, no way. No way. No way it's truly happening like that. And so I went and I lightly benchmarked it, and I wasn't really seeing anything like he was seeing. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just a joke. Maybe it's just a scam. I don't know. It just might be wrong. And then Gigabeef made a video on it. And then when he made the video on it, I was like, okay, maybe there's actually something to this. So I went and I dug a little bit deeper and did some more testing to actually figure out what was going on here. At first, when I went to benchmark this, I went to streets offline without bots, and I was also GPU bottlenecked in that scenario, and I was not seeing any sort of impact. Thinking that might be the cause, I then switched to resampling 0.5x, in order to force a CPU bottleneck. On top of this, I realized that Gigabeef was testing with bots on low when he was offline, meaning there was bot pressure while he was in raid. I then did the same, and I actually found the impact they were discussing. Let me show that to you right now. There are a couple things you need to know though before you go and benchmark. As I said, it will be crucial if you want to see this difference to go to enable practice mode, go to your game settings in here, and set the PvE settings to at least low. Having this set like that will ensure that there will be bot pressure in raid, but not too much, and will also give you results that are similar to what they saw here. And it's crucial for a part of the video that I'll explain later. Also, as I said, you want to ensure that you're in a CPU bound scenario. So for me, I just set my resampling down to 0.5x. This rendered at half the native resolution and therefore forced a CPU bound scenario. With that, let's get into streets. As I'm walking over to the benchmark spot, I just really want to note as well that generally I don't benchmark with offline with bots. And the reason for that is just because of the variability in pressure and the random stutters you can get from the scavs having to spawn in and control the logic on your local system. It can be a little inconsistent, and offline without bots gives me much more consistent results that I use generally. However, the increase in CPU pressure from having bots on is crucial in order to see the difference that Gigabeef and the Redditor was describing. I decided for this I would go to the rough spot where Gigabeef was looking over and testing some of his results. As we walk up here, you can see my FPS is going to start to settle around 75, 76. It'll probably bump up at least a little bit here. To test this, all you have to do is go into your settings, and I ensured that I had auto ramp cleaner off, by the way, just for this test. And then I went ahead and, that's not in graphics, it's in game, right here, vaulting over medium obstacles. If I set this to audio, what the hell? If I set this to auto, you should see my FPS drastically decrease from 75. And that is exactly what you see. We have now dipped below 60 FPS in this test configuration. We're offline with bots on low, and we simply switched from hotkey to auto vaulting. However, as you can see by the numbers that I'll put on screen for you guys, it's not that simple. There are a lot of other factors to this than meets the eye, as both in offline without bots and online, the difference was much less drastic than originally anticipated. I wanted to quickly demonstrate why that might be the case. I have my own theory, and it has to do with the utilization that I saw in Process Lasso. I collected some screenshots just showcasing the utilization of each individual thread when I was in offline with bots and when I swapped the settings. To make a long story short, I'll try to explain this as simply as possible. Tarkov can be bottlenecked by a single thread on your CPU, and this is just due to the API that it uses and how that API sends frame data over to the GPU. This is completely fine. DX11 is a common API, and though there are more up-to-date ones out, it's completely fine using this. It's not the end of the world. You can see that thread number 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 here is bottlenecked. It is at 100% usage, and the other cores are working on things to send to that core that then sends over to the GPU, or they're just working on other logic. The point is that all of these threads have to wait on this thread in order to continue doing work. This is important, as when I set from hotkey, which we're on right now, when I set from hotkey over to auto, the usage for each thread that's not the render thread dramatically decreased. And of course, as you just saw, the FPS decrease comes with that. This then made me have a theory. I'm assuming the auto vaulting has some sort of check that's being consistently applied to the game, and that logic has to be done by the CPU. I believe the work for that logic is being placed onto this render thread right here. This bottlenecked thread has to then deal with the increased workload from doing that auto vaulting check, resulting in lower FPS, specifically in this scenario on offline bots. And I'll flip through really quick so you can get a better idea of the difference here. The reason I think that this is the case is because of that decreased usage on every other thread. That auto vaulting check has to be putting more pressure on the bottleneck of my system, or else I wouldn't be noticing an FPS decrease. And that bottleneck is that thread. There's increased pressure from me being offline in bots, and that's where the increase in FPS difference comes into play. As you see in this data, online and offline without bots weren't showing the same FPS increase that offline with bots was showing. This is because the pressure from these different testing methodologies is different from offline with bots. Offline with bots puts specifically more pressure, it seems, on that single thread than otherwise normally. And I think that's where that FPS difference comes into play. Normally on online or offline, it's more like a couple FPS, a couple percentage points total in average FPS, nothing to really write home about, but still an FPS decrease that should be optimized. If I were the devs, it would be good to not have this be such a impactful setting. However, it's not as crazy of an FPS boost as was originally described inside that Reddit post. The only reason it was when they tested it is because of this specific scenario and its impact on CPU-bound scenarios. You will not see this same difference if you're in a heavy GPU-bound scenario, because then the CPU has the extra breathing room to spare. I noticed this as well when I was testing no bots, as regardless of whether I was setting auto or hotkey, the FPS difference wasn't as crazy. And on top of that, when I was looking at core by core and thread by thread utility, the main render thread, which was right here, the bottlenecking thread, was sometimes dipping below 100% usage. So there was a bit more headroom to spare on occasion, and thus a dramatically less impactful FPS change when switching from auto to hotkey. So what should you expect by changing this from auto to hotkey? Well, generally, when you're online and you are CPU bound, I wouldn't suggest you'd get more than a couple FPS boost, or in better terminology, a couple percentage points improvement. It might be hard for you to tell unless you're actually running benchmarks and going to the same place every raid to check your frame rate. It still technically is an improvement when you switch to hotkey, but it is not as major as that Reddit post described unless you are offline with bots. Obviously, I just want you guys to keep in mind as well, I'm not working for BSG, I'm not in the development room, and so I don't know exactly what the cause is here. But given the tools that I have so far, I figured I'd make my video on it and try to at least explain my theory as to why this might be going on. It is in fact real, but it's not as impactful as was previously thought. It all depends on how your system is bottlenecked, and if it's a bottleneck on a single thread. But yeah, for now guys, I hope this helped at least a little bit describe what the problem was. If you need any assistance in benchmarking anything or figuring out your settings or whatever, Discord linked below. I would highly recommend joining that, as we have a new help forum where you can specifically request help with your setup. It's a really awesome place to get help with your settings, or just talk Tarkov or talk tech. I'm in there quite frequently, so if you want to hang out and discuss things with the community, feel free to join. I'll also be streaming tonight, or the day after this video goes live, every Friday at 6:30 p.m. CST, and every Sunday at 1:30 p.m. CST, I'll be live with a PC Sherpa series, so you guys can come into the stream one-on-one with me live to help fix your problems. There were so many responses to the PC Sherpa forum that I figured I'd do this as well, in an attempt to help as many of you guys as I could. But yeah, I appreciate you guys watching and supporting the videos, and I will be submitting the data that I have so far and my theory to BSG in a bug report to hopefully try and get this fixed soon. I hope this helped you figure everything out, and make sure to hit the usual buttons. And for now, this is Clem, clocking out. Later.